I'm James Rule. Welcome to the Lonely Leader podcast, where we help existing and aspiring leaders find clarity, build resilience, drive performance, and enhance fulfillment. Why senior leaders procrastinate and what it's really costing you. That's the focus of today's episode. I think we're all aware of procrastination and it will have impacted all of us to a degree at some stage in our career. But recently, it's become particularly prolific with the senior leaders I work with, people with lots of experience under the belt, and the frustration is palpable. Why am I procrastinating? So today, wherever you are on your leadership journey, senior positions, more junior positions, I want to reflect on this debilitating habit of procrastination, why it happens, some of the things we can do to prevent it so that it doesn't become an energy drain and yet another thing that you become self-critical about as you recognize you're doing it but can't quite work out how to stop it and get yourself back on task. I think what's interesting, when we think of procrastination, we often think of laziness, avoiding things that need to get done. But at the senior level, it becomes a little bit more nuanced. It's more of what I call that active procrastination. We avoid doing the critical things because we're allowing our time to be filled in other areas. So we're undoubtedly busy. We have calendars that are stacked out. I often say recently with clients that I'm working with, when I ask them to show me their calendar, it looks like something out of Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. There's blocks everywhere, there's colors everywhere. And what is a bizarre result of modern hybrid working, we could say, is increasingly people with shared calendars are seeing themselves double booked, triple booked, quadruple booked. And in one recent example, a client of mine had 5 separate requirements that had all been dropped into his diary at the same time. So that's an issue separate to this, but it has a dotted line. Diary management and where our priorities are is an important topic, but what it's allowing us to do is to feed our procrastination by just staying busy. If the calendar's full, we avoid that time to think, we avoid that reflection time, and consequently we can kick some of those most important tasks down the road. Well, where am I going to do it? Look at my diary, and 1 week becomes a month, becomes a year, and we just get comfortable with that active procrastination. Another thing that senior leaders do is firefighting. Now, there are always fires to fight. The nature of the job, the more senior you become, the more issues that need resolving. However, and it is a big however, invariably you have leaders around you, team leaders, managers, heads of department, and they have intelligence, experience, and a high level of competence to address many of the fires we allow ourselves to get drawn into if we are struggling with procrastination. Just like the full diary. Is there anyone that needs me? There will always be somebody that needs you in your organization. There will always be a call to make, an email to send, or a meeting to attend if you want to go looking for those small fires, but are they really what you should be involved in? So telling you something you already know, but be aware of procrastination and its many faces. It isn't just sitting doodling at your desk and not engaging in the task. You might be filling that calendar, staying really busy, particularly diving into meetings that you perhaps don't need to be, and firefighting in areas you don't need to go. They are the most common forms of procrastination that I am seeing, especially with regard to the senior leaders that I am working with. Regular listeners of the podcast will know that I welcome feedback from our Lonely Leader community. The feedback that I derive from you, our listeners, and from you as individual clients when I'm working with you one-to-one is the driving force for this podcast. If I see themes and challenges that lots of people are struggling with, that is what informs my decisions on the content to create. So special shout out to Pete, who was somebody in a senior role recently saying to me, I'm frustrated that I'm getting stuck in procrastination. So I appreciate that feedback and I hope this episode helps Pete, but all of you listening with regard to this issue. So I want to just step into being a little bit more understanding of this and not being so hard on yourself. Why is it happening? It happens to practically all of us at some stage. So for those of you that have been battling procrastination throughout your career, you're perhaps a bit more tolerant of it. For those of you that are not used to this happening, increasingly become very frustrated. Why is this happening? I've always been very good at just getting things done, moving forward. Why am I getting trapped in procrastination? So let me just answer that question by giving you some comfort of the common reasons I see as the driver for why procrastination might just rear its ugly head when you've not been used to that disrupting you in the past. So, the first area to consider is the weight of our decisions. The more senior we become, the more impact our decisions have. And that can start to gnaw away at us. We know that every decision impacts on the culture and the environment that we are building. We know that our decisions impact people personally. It impacts their professional role. It can impact their personal life. It can impact their livelihoods, particularly when we're dealing with the hiring and firing, recruitment and retention of staff. We know those decisions have a huge ripple effect. And because we know the impact our decisions have, we can look for relief and escape from that. It doesn't resolve the issue, but sometimes we procrastinate and move away. We move away from the difficult decisions because of the consequences we know they will have. That is only natural, and that becomes more and more prevalent the more senior you become and the more impact you know your decisions will have. The second area ties into the first one, the weight of decisions. There's also an area to consider, which is the emotional cost. Certain decisions have a higher emotional cost than others, particularly when you're dealing with conflict resolution, when you're dealing with disappointing people. You may be saying no to somebody's passion project, their baby, they want to take their department or part of the organization in a certain direction. You're going to say no. You know they're going to be hugely disappointed. It can link into budgetary requests. It can link into people's desire to expand their team, to promote people, to bring new headcount into their department. You know that certain decisions, when you say no to certain things, have an emotional cost, an emotional drain. And particularly when you're stepping into those emotionally draining areas of conflict resolution that every leader has to engage in at some point, you know the emotional cost, you know the fatigue it's going to create, and it's only natural, depending on where your personal energy levels are and your resilience is and your mindset is, at any given point, your appetite for that can wane, and therefore you push it away. You try and delay it, you get trapped in that procrastination because you don't feel like you've got the energy to step into those challenges currently. A third area to consider, and one of the major drivers of procrastination, is identity tension. Now, to expand on this in more detail, I would encourage you to look at the episode linked in the show notes that we recorded previously, where I really dive deeply into this topic. And it sits around the question that increasingly pops up for senior leaders, which is it worth it? We start to look at what leadership is taking out of us, and that question comes to the fore. And that episode was all about reframing the question to, instead of suffering under that question, reframing it under the terms of, what do I need to do to make it worthwhile? So our identity tension comes in a multitude of ways. We evolve as people. Our definition of success evolves. Our motivation can evolve. And what is important to us can change with age, with maturity, with seniority. And the role can evolve. The role that you started out leading in may have shifted, may have moved in a slightly different direction. And all of these things sit back under the identity, who you are, what you stand for, what matters to you. Is it aligned with your values and where you want to go? And so if there's a tension there, if there's a conflict developing, then that can naturally suck you into procrastination. Now, I don't want you to get frustrated when you hear this. Oh, yeah, this is me. What do I do? What do I do? Well, this is the whole rationale of the podcast, to make you reflect, to make you think. One of the things I spend most of my time with as a coach is identifying where these triggers are and being able to unpack them. So whether it is the fear of the emotional cost that's causing you to procrastinate, whether it is the weight of the decisions, whether it is the development of an identity tension, the first step is awareness, and then we can start to build a plan to help you move through that procrastinating habit. Something I would say to you if we were sitting one-to-one in a coaching session is, do not get frustrated. when you feel that you are procrastinating. It's a bit like the insomniac that can't sleep but gets angry at themselves for not sleeping. It doesn't actually bring any solution. So the first thing to remember is, okay, I'm procrastinating. I'm going to use that as a positive. What's the positive? Well, it's a signal. It's feedback. Something's not quite right. Am I lacking clarity? Am I leaking energy somewhere? Have I got a fear that needs confronting? But we need to unpack it. So the first thing is, okay, I'm aware of it. I don't really want procrastination in my world, but it's a signal. What am I going to do with that signal? That becomes a much more proactive situation, a situation that you can control rather than living in a reactive situation where you feel that you're being controlled by the procrastination. So let's step forward. Let's step into it. What sort of questions do we need to ask to do that effectively? So let's jump into a handful of steps that I think can help us push through procrastination. First and foremost, name what you are avoiding. What is the task, the project, the conversation that deep down in your heart, you know, I'm procrastinating around that? The control element of this is important to me. Write it down, state it. I am avoiding doing X. That is the first step of retaking control and putting yourself back into that empowered, proactive mindset. And the second part of that, once you've established what it is, why? What is the emotion attached to it? Maybe it's fear, but we need to understand why. What am I fearful of? I'm avoiding conversation X with individual Y. Why? I'm fearful of their reaction. I'm fearful of how they are going to respond to the conversation I know I need to have. So we get the clarity. We get that clarity. We build that foundation on which we can move forward. Step number 2, define the controllable. We highlighted in the previous step that fear is the emotion that often gets in our way. And fear takes us down a negative spiral. Well, I'm going to have this difficult conversation and then this will happen and this will happen. And then that person will probably storm out and then he'll have conversations with other staff and it'll be a ripple effect and it's going to go on and on. Our mind likes to take us down that area. So we need to step back from the things we can't control. We can't control other people's behavior. We can't control what might happen. We can control the present moment. And we need to regain control. And crucially, we need to regain momentum. So what can I control in this situation? Start to map that out and do something immediately. So let's go back to that difficult conversation. What can I control in this situation? Well, I can gather my thoughts and make sure I rehearse my opening delivery so that it's succinct to the point and I don't get lost in a waffle and go off on tangents. That is an immediate action. You can start to write down about what are the issues you need to address with this underperforming individual. What are they in order of priority? How are you going to open up the meeting? Stand up, pace around, stand in front of a mirror, stand looking into a Zoom call or a Teams call, look at how you relay that information, rehearse it so that when the undoubted adrenaline kicks in or the cortisol kicks in and that fear is trying to knock you off track, you've already rehearsed it and you've got a very clear positioning and delivery to that individual. Step number 3, give yourself time to think. Decisions will be coming at you every single day. You will be making scores, if not hundreds, of decisions every single week. If you feel overwhelmed by the volume of your to-do list, the scope and level and diversity of decisions, it's easy to just start procrastinating. I haven't got bandwidth for this. I'll go to the low-hanging fruit. I'll avoid this task. I'll get back on my emails. I'll make a call. I'll attend a meeting that perhaps I don't really need to be at. It's all avoidance strategies. But if we actually give ourselves time to think, if we protect some time in our weekly calendar to say, what is top of my agenda? What am I avoiding? Going back through these steps, why am I avoiding it? What is the emotion? What is the controllable? Those first 2 steps need thinking time. So step number 3 underpins the first couple of steps we've alluded to. You need to be able to open up your calendar and not see the doomsday scenario I alluded to earlier with a client where there's 5 meetings all overlaying each other at the same time, but you can see parking spots through the week, half-hour windows maybe. That's all it might be able to be in the short term, but certainly building up to little blocks, an hour here, an hour there, where you can think, take control, identify what you're avoiding, identify the emotion, identify the controllable, and you will take action as a consequence. But step number one has to be space to think. Otherwise, you will be trapped in that cycle of procrastination. Step number four, eliminate the unnecessary energy drains. Now, if you have that as the hub of the wheel, there's a multitude of spokes coming off. Meetings that you're in that you don't need to be in. I've touched on this in a number of ways already in this episode, but they drain your energy. You only have so much bandwidth in the day. If you're allowing yourself to go to every possible meeting that you are requested to attend, that's naturally going to drain your energy. What about one-to-one interactions? Those, have you got a minute? You let everybody come through your office door. Of course, it's never a minute. So the level of interruptions, the meetings you're attending, certain individuals that you are diving into the micromanagement of, all of these things drain your energy. And when your energy levels are low, it's harder to say, right, let me be decisive, let me move forward, let me attack those core priorities. And it's much easier to be, I'll leave that for another day. I don't feel quite up to doing that. So eliminate those drains. Do an audit of your meeting. Do an audit of your diaries when I say meetings. Do an audit of the meetings you're attending. Should you be there? Do you need to be there? What value are you giving? What value are you deriving? Should you really be delegating attendance there? You have people around you for a reason. You're not an island. Allow people that are very competent, experienced and intelligent to go and represent in certain meetings. You don't need to be everywhere. What are the individuals that are constantly beating a path to your door with, have you got a minute? Can you relinquish that and direct them to somebody else? Or if they need to come to you, perhaps you can start to structure your diary differently. Perhaps rather than the same person popping up several times a day, you say, actually, I've noticed we're talking so many times. Why don't we actually structure something where we have a weekly catch up? And the vast majority of these disruptions we can put into one meeting and deal with them in one go. Great way to protect your energy, great way to protect your disruption, because low energy and high level of disruption will always push you back into procrastination. And my final tip would be find the right accountability to drive you forward. It's very easy to get caught in a loop in your own mind, debating and deliberating over the same issues and getting trapped in procrastination. It becomes much harder if you sit down with a trusted colleague, a mentor, or a coach such as myself and say, right, this is the issue I'm dealing with. Okay, what's the emotion behind it? Well, it's fear. Okay, so what is the controllable here? What can you do? I can do X. Okay, let's go ahead and execute that. And then you come back. Did you do it? No. You have the same conversation. What's the thing that you're procrastinating on? Well, it's X. What is the emotion? Well, it's this. What is the controllable? Well, it's still the same as we said last time. And so on and so forth. If you keep coming back and having to have the same conversation with somebody that you've already had, but validate that you've taken no action, it almost becomes embarrassing. So knowing you have that accountability, it drives you to say, well, I'm not going to go back and say, oh, I'm still wrestling with the same decision in my mind and I haven't done anything about it. I haven't taken action on the controllables we discussed. I haven't moved forward and I'm still procrastinating. So that little bit of accountability helps push you forward so that you can go back to that peer, that colleague, that coach and say, I did it, I executed it, it went well, or perhaps it didn't go as well as I'd liked, but now I have new intelligence, new feedback. So now I'm thinking, this is what I need to do. And lo and behold, you are up and running, you have momentum. So accountability is a really subtle but impactful way to help you break through the trap of procrastination. And it's in that space of accountability that I really come to life. I love to help people step through their challenges as leaders to ensure that they can create high performance for themselves and for their wider team, but not just over the short term, over the longer term. And we need to be able to manage and address procrastination. So if that is something you are struggling with and you'd like to reach out and book an insight call, please do so, because we can explore a variety of strategies building on what we've talked about today and a whole raft of other tools and tactics to help you ensure that procrastination is not something that you are having to wrestle with on a regular basis. And even if you don't want to reach out one-to-one, let me leave you with this leadership challenge. Sit down with your journal, identify what it is that you are procrastinating about. Walk through the steps we've talked about. Why am I procrastinating? What is the controllable? Give yourself some time to think, to map that out. And then ask yourself this question. What will it cost me if I do not take action on this issue? What will it cost me if I do not take action on this issue? And then challenge yourself to write down, because when we write things down, the accountability and the accountability is so much higher, and the probability of actually executing is significantly different. So what is the quantifiable action you're going to take, and by when? Put a timeline on it. So let's go back to the thing I was saying earlier. What is the thing I'm procrastinating about? It's the difficult conversation with staff member X. Why? Fear of their reaction. What is this going to cost me? Well, it's going to continue to cost me energy, because until I deal with it, it's like a stone in my shoe that will not go away. It's also going to cost me my credibility with the team, because they can see this individual's not performing. They can see that I can see this individual's not performing, and they are not seeing me deal with it. So they will start to lose respect for me. Equally, there is a cultural impact that if people fall below standard and it's not addressed, then that becomes the new standard, which further disappoints, frustrates, and alienates your high performers. And so the longer term cost of avoiding difficult conversations is we are in a race to the bottom on our standards. It becomes harder to recruit and retain the best people, and all we're left with is a multitude of people who are happy at that lower standard. Now, I know that might seem a bit dramatic and overly negative, but it's that sort of dialogue we need to give ourselves that gentle nudge to say, I'm not prepared to allow that cost to manifest. So therefore, I'm going to take action. I am going to prepare my thoughts of how I'm going to handle that meeting, and I will do that by when? By the end of the week. I am then going to book a meeting with said individual by when? By the end of the following week. That is me walking you through a very simple but very practical way to step through procrastination. So please do embrace that challenge. Please do open your journal. Please do walk through those steps and write it down. I hope this has been helpful. You are not alone in wrestling with this. You are particularly not alone in finding this coming over the hill and surprising you as you get into more senior positions, for all the reasons I said at the start of this episode. So please do continue to share your feedback. It will inform and shape my future episodes. If you haven't rated the podcast, could I make a request that you give it a star rating? Perhaps write a couple of lines if you're on a platform that allows you to do that. It makes all the difference in terms of the algorithms and the reach that the podcast gets and the number of people we are able to help and support. Everything we talk about is a challenge that other leaders are dealing with, and therefore the more people we can reach, the more we can help reduce those challenges, reduce that sense of overwhelm, and help people find that higher level of performance and ultimately professional and personal fulfillment in everything they do. So thank you for your support on that, and I wish you the best of luck in your continued journey of growth and development. Thanks for listening to the Lonely Leader podcast. I'd be very grateful if you could share and follow if the content resonates. And if you're looking for additional free resource to support your continued growth and development, then please do check out our social media and website details in the show notes. Remember, quality leadership on the outside must always start within.